Okay, now what do I do? Where do I go? What are some of the resources available to help you with your innovation? Linda Zambia is a founder. She's actually a two-time founder. Her current company is Aero Defense, which is a New Jersey-based, American-made proprietary drone detection technology company. She had previously worked as a key executive for a company called LiveLook, which was a collaborative software company that had been acquired by Oracle. We also have Mike Vandersloot, who is Associate Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at New Jersey Innovation Institute, and he can really talk to some of the resources that are going to be available to try to help you from an academic perspective make some of those collaborations happen. And I see our last panelist, Scott, is talking to Tatiana. Scott is going to be joining us here for a second. He is with the SBA. He is an investment officer with their Small Business Innovation SBIC program, responsible for helping to get money out to the street. As you've heard from me before, I'm Judith Shepton. I'm the Executive Director of the New Jersey Commission on Science, Innovation, and Technology. I want to shout out to a couple of my colleagues who are here. Maku Edda and Francis Keel are here with the Commission on Science, Innovation, and Technology, and they can help you with information around specific grant programs that as businesses you are going to be able to apply for. We have seed grant programs from the Commission that allow companies to kind of continue some of that R&D activity as you're kind of moving through the valley of death, or ditch of commercialization. We also have a voucher program that, again, Mike Zwick had talked about, where we allow companies to get access to some of the unique specialized facilities at New Jersey universities, whether it's Rutgers, NJIT, Princeton, Rowan, Montclair, Stevens, Stockton, maker spaces around the state. We want to be able to help you leverage capabilities from our universities as well as our research with New Jersey platform. I'm going to ask our panelists to begin by doing a quick introduction of themselves and talk a little bit about some of the kinds of ways that they can help businesses move forward. So Scott, if you'd like to go first. Right here.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I guess I'll just start by saying the last time that I spoke at one of these conferences was a tech transfer conference in Nashville, Tennessee. And on the panel it said TBD from SBA, and I was wondering just as much as everyone else who that person would be. And it turned out to be me 30 minutes later, and I got on stage and I said, look, I am as disappointed in you are that it's me. And so I'm actually pinch hitting today as well for my esteemed colleague, Jennifer Shee, who has a PhD, been involved in the SBIR and SDTR programs for a number of years. And so I would say, if you're disappointed that she's not there, I can understand. I'm a little disappointed as well. So here I am, and so I'll do my best to explain what I do and what our office does. So very briefly, so I manage or help manage, I'm actually a senior investment officer. It was a title I gave myself later. So the SBIC program, I guess just by a show of hands, I think it would be helpful to give some context for what we do. Just by a show of hands, how many people in the audience have used an Apple product or shopped at Costco? Just by a show of hands. So, great. So most of the people in the room, so those companies were financed, among others, Federal Express, Costco, when those companies were small businesses by our program. And the way the program works, actually I'll just say one other thing. The first time I gave a speech, I testified before Congress, and I asked for one more raise of hands, and I asked a bunch of senators and congressmen, who would rather be anywhere else than right here, right now? And almost the entire room raised their hands. So I don't think that's going to be the case.
We're not asking that question.
Yeah, we're not doing that. So I didn't even ask it. But so the SBIC program basically is a federal fund of funds, and we have the ability to invest now up to $5 billion in funds that then invest in U.S. small businesses. We are, unlike other programs that provide financing more directly to companies, this is a program that provides capital to funds, which in turn invest in companies to spur innovation, catalyze private investment. And the program has grown in my tenure from 13 billion of assets under management to now over 37 billion. Loss rates have decreased. I think one of the cool things about the program is that it operates at a zero subsidy, so when people see me traveling, they always joke and say, oh, that's our tax dollars at work, you're traveling around. Well, it doesn't cost any money for you guys. All of our investments are privately financed, and we actually make money as funds apply. So that's the SBIC program. And again, these are funds that are typically investing in established companies, and they're structuring their investment with some sort of debt, senior debt, subordinated debt. So later stage than I think, later stage than what a lot of the initiatives and endeavors you guys are pursuing at this conference. Our office also holds, and I think this is probably more germane to what we're discussing today, it also holds the SBIR and STTR programs, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
So we ask a question, how many people have applied for SBIR, STTR? We got a good.
Okay, so that's great. And so how many of you received an SBIR and STTR grant? Okay, so some. So we've had success. That's great. So my understanding, so I'm getting up to speed on this, and I'll just say this very generally, is that the SBIR and STTR programs are 11 federal agencies that provide grants in 2 phases, essentially for proof of concept, technological development, to spur innovation and address national needs or market needs. We also in our office have the FAST program, which provides grants and financing to organizations that support entrepreneurship, which I think there may be some here. Are there any ESOs that have received FAST funding here?
So we can announce that the Rutgers Small Business Development Center just recently received a federal FAST award with support, matching dollar support from the Commission on Science, Innovation, and Technology. There's a couple of flyers, again, up at the registration table on November 30th. We're going to be doing a joint online webinar with the Small Business Development Center, Bio New Jersey, and NIH about getting NIH SBIR awards. It's a free online seminar, and again, that's part of our FAST program. And FAST, through the Small Business Development Center, will also do one-on-one coaching for entrepreneurs to kind of help them through that process, since there's 11 agencies and 11 different processes.
Well, congratulations, that's great. The office also has, in addition to the SBR, STTR programs, the FAST program, we also have a growth accelerator competition, which I've been a judge at for every year. And so, helping to provide financing for promising accelerators and incubators throughout the country. And so, it's sort of the combination of those two. So you've got the SBIR, STTR programs that are, hopefully providing non-dilutive capital, which is great, no share in equity, so all the benefit inures to the investors and to the companies. And much like our SBIC program, our capital is also non-dilutive. So we're providing investment to funds, we don't share any of the upside, and all of the investments that we make are privately financed. And so currently the program, as I mentioned, is $37 billion of assets under management. Last year we invested with private capital $7 billion in over 1,000 companies. So it's one of the few instances in federal government where the program really is providing capital to entrepreneurs and doing it in a way that's less dilutive and helpful to the growth.
Great, thank you. And I want people in this audience to know New Jersey is working on that SBIC program, so you should be hearing about some additional funds that are going to be made available through the New Jersey Economic Development Authority to help fund entrepreneurs in that area. So Linda, as an entrepreneur, tell us a little bit about yourself and the background of your organization, how you got to where you are.
All right, thank you, Judith, and thank you, Small Business Administration, because the direct to phase 2 SBIR contract that we received in June of 2020 allowed us to stay in business and retain 100% ownership with no other outside investment, so. So how I got here, it's interesting. Like, you don't think that when I was a little girl, I said, hey, I want to run a drone detection business and sell to the Air Force and Homeland Security and prisons and stadiums. Probably not. So what we do is it's a system that detects when drones are flying where they shouldn't be flying. If it's a stadium, it's dangerous, it could disrupt the game. If it's a prison, well, let me tell you, the Amazon delivery folks could learn a lot because they've been doing drone delivery for years into the prisons. Drugs, cigarettes, the fear is weapons, but so there's a lot to be learned there. I was, as Judith mentioned, involved with another company, Help Meeting. Live Look was the name it ultimately became. I worked just down the street for many years. We were supported by the NJECC and learned a lot there. I learned how to be an entrepreneur, and it is tough. So I would encourage the universities, as you think about how to navigate a student invention with the university, to also think about that entrepreneur that you want to bring in to help commercialize that. Think about what it means to them from a financial model. I actually considered that route, but it's a very expensive proposition in the long run if you're successful to have to put a percentage of your revenue to a license agreement if you've contributed to building it.
Great, well, thank you, Linda. So, Mike, you work a lot with faculty here at New Jersey Institute of Technology. How do you help them as they're moving further along and, as I said, kind of getting past that valley of death piece around a technology that might have originally been funded as part of kind of a basic research thing, and now they need to move it forward through some kind of collaboration activities?
Yeah, thanks, Judith. Again, my name is Mike Mantrus-Luz. I work right here at NJECC within the Innovation Institute, and then more specifically the Entrepreneurship and Commercialization team here at NJII. Trina, moderating the last panel, had asked, how do faculty begin that journey, right? So I am, like Scott, certainly a resource to our faculty, but instead of providing funding, I mostly provide blood, sweat, and tears. It is certainly what it feels like. So faculty that have an interest with working with the private sector will come to myself and others in this kind of infrastructure to support those faculty to make those industry connections. So I've been in this space now for a few years, and at risk of making a historical generalization, a lot of the NSF grants, a lot of the DOE grants, and the DOT grants are now offering a lot of funding for translational research, kind of a phase 1, phase 2 approach. So working with faculty that can take their technology and then scope it into a phase 1 pilot to prove out and demonstrate that technology. And helping them kind of make that shift in thinking of the business case of their technology. I don't have an academic background, and what I've learned working in this space for the past few years is that faculty are very much connected to their academic community. They are very aware of the research gaps in the space that they're in, which oftentimes does not overlap with industry needs. So we can work and select strategic sectors of the economy, help articulate what those industry needs are, and help them reframe what they're doing in addition to what their research gaps are in their particular academic field into what those industry needs are.
Great, and certainly one of the other programs that we heard about on the panel that Trina moderated was the I-Corps program, which again is helping you get out talk to industry and understand is what you're working on something that they're interested in. So when you talk to investors, what kind of tips, and Linda, you've obviously talked to a lot of investors, but what kind of tips can you give to faculty and early teams about going out and talking to investors to be able to capture their attention and have a valuable conversation?
Sure. And I just want to circle back to how I got here. I meant to give a shout out to NJIT because it was a commercial solutions opening here at NJIT back in 2019, where we met the Joint Base McGuire-Dix Lakehurst, and that was how we ended up here. It took a long time, but that's how we got our contract, which I highly value. Talking with investors, I forget who, I think it might have been Mike, who said, make sure the problem you're solving is a need to have, that it's important, and that it's a big problem, that there's a big enough market. That's going to be the key thing that investors want to know is what is the pain point that you're solving and who is feeling that pain. I would say that's the most important thing when you're talking to the investors. The other thing I would tell you as an entrepreneur is hold on to that equity as long as you can. The non-dilutive programs are phenomenal. Equity can be the most expensive way of funding your company that there is. I compete with companies who have raised $100 million in venture capital. Their companies are valued at $300 million. We've taken 2 customers off of their website because we're a superior product. So you keep your head down and work on your product and your customers as long as you can, but that's on the path of you're going to build a business. And I have a lot of thoughts on that too, but I don't want to monopolize.
So Mike, can you talk a little bit about how you help faculty when they're having those conversations about getting into the translational research? What are some of the things that you as a facilitator, catalyzer can help so that they're amplifying their work?
Yeah, I mean, it really resonates with the comment that you just made around really having them make their technology secondary, right? Which is really not their typical orientation. They want to go out, faculty want to go out and talk about kind of that novel, how novel their innovation is and what it can do. And that's the second or third conversation with, in my case, it's not investors, it's external partners, right? It's starting with their needs, having them frame it in a business case. How does it advance, a particular goal of that business, and just helping them through that process and reframing that process, is the biggest kind of element that I find myself playing that kind of translational role.
And so do you help faculty, and I know on the earlier panel, Mike Wiley talked about some of the programs from the New Jersey Health Foundation. Do you coach them and help kind of look at presentations that they might be giving to some of either, like a New Jersey Health Foundation, or if they're going to go talk to some of these partners so that it's framed properly?
Absolutely. So the entrepreneurship and commercialization team lives inside VentureLink, which is our incubator just across the road, and we provide those types of support service to student entrepreneurs, faculty entrepreneurs as well, helping them hone that pitch, and making it framed properly for who that audience is going to be.
Great, and I know there's other programs at some of the other universities, and Scott, you'd like to jump in on that?
I was just going to ask you a question. So having spoken on a couple of panels related to technology transfer, one of the challenges that I've heard is you've got a lot of professors that have the technology, but they don't know how to run a business. And so it's how to convince them, maybe the skills they need to do, augmenting the team. And then also my understanding is that there are limitations at universities. There are universities like MIT, Stanford that do tech transfer very well, but a lot of schools that don't. How much of your job is helping to change the environment in the university, and then also the thinking on behalf of the professors that really haven't run a business in a lot of instances, augment their team and really build out a commercial enterprise.
That's a big question, and not to punt on the question, but almost a little bit above my pay grade as far as the best thing we can do to change the culture is kind of lead by example. So when I said the blood, sweat, and tears thing, it really is like I am on their team, right? I am on that faculty's team and working with them to build opportunities, essentially helping them do the business development piece. And I think promoting that, when we have successes with faculty, and then it's almost a word of mouth, right? When other faculty recognize that NJIT is providing this resource, when they recognize, oh, we have folks on staff that will help you do that like true boots on the ground work, then I get overloaded essentially. But kind of leading by example and helping to offer those resources and putting myself out there, putting my team out there, I think that is the best way to kind of change that culture. What I was interesting, I don't do enough networking across other universities, but the concept of having the faculty ends up being much more of an advisor, and the success stories we have here is when their PhD student ends up being the one that spins out for the startup. So the faculty's role kind of steps back a little bit, and then the PhD student ends up in VentureLink, going what Judith was mentioning around going through those programs and helping them become more the entrepreneur and spinning out of NJIT. That has been a successful path, and it's interesting to hear that other universities are going down that road as well.
So I'd like to talk about pivoting. You kind of start in one direction, you think your technology is going one way, and then you've done this interaction with the marketplace and you're perhaps getting feedback that's going to suggest you ought to change direction. Linda, can you talk a little bit, have you had to pivot with either of the two companies you've been involved with, kind of say, oh, I thought I was going this way, but now I really decide it's kind of orthogonal to what I was going to do?
Absolutely. But I'm going to go back to the one because I have a comment I want to share here too. Another shout out to Stevens Institute of Technology. We have 3 out of now 14 employees who are Stevens graduates, 2 masters and 1 undergraduate. And I would echo that the kids that come through school and are entrepreneurial are gold. They will work themselves into frenzy, because they're passionate, and I would definitely echo that. So I'll pivot back now.
Yeah.
Judith, can I add a point around? Oh, I'm sorry. Pivot about your pivot.
No. I was going back to the original question.
Again, I wanted to make, Scott, you mentioned limitations, and I actually find doing technology development projects inside of a university ecosystem as a very expansive opportunity, almost limitless. So the ability we do a lot of work in the smart city space and working with municipalities, working with the transit authorities, and smart city has lost its luster a little bit for lots of reasons. But being able to create partnerships, in fact, across the road on the Rutgers side with their social sciences team, NJIT is a Polytechnic, partnering with their social sciences teams to take that kind of community-first approach to technology development. That's been fascinating for me, and I think a solution to some of our challenges with smart city, deploying technology in the public setting. I don't know a lot of other places where that can happen. A university environment, it's just the riches here to be able to build these teams with unique capabilities, I think is super cool.
Sorry.
Back to you, Linda.
Yeah, back to me, but I'm going back to Mike. I think back now, how did I end up here? Well, I'm old, so there's a lot of turns and forks along the way, and one of them was an entrepreneurial opportunity when I worked for AT&T. And at the time, they never, ever let developers talk to salespeople. That was just unheard of. But they put developers and builders and everybody, finance people, all in an office. And that was my first real experience at entrepreneurship, but we had the safety net of the big corporation with deep pockets. So maybe that's an avenue as well, to loop in corporations. Pivot.
Pivot, okay. So I'd like to ask, from an SBA perspective, this conference is all about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Can you talk, Scott, a little bit about some of the efforts that SBA in general is doing on the DE&I front?
Sure. So that's actually my job, is to increase diversity, equity, inclusion within the program. So women, minorities, and veterans. And quite frankly, it's been a challenge. So personally, I have an internship program where we've recruited 16 unpaid interns from, and I wish I could pay them, we just don't have the capital, but when you hear how much money they make after the internship, it makes it worth it. But so of the 16 interns we've had, 13 have been women and or minorities, have all gone on to make six figures. So it's doing something internally, as you mentioned earlier, leading by example. So that's what we do internally. We also are actively conducting outreach at emerging manager conferences, and the stats show, and it takes work. I think one of the things that we've realized is that although our core product is fund level debt, which invests, and because of that, it's fund level debt, it has an interest requirement, which is typically not a good fit for early stage funds, which you want to reinvest proceeds into the growth of the company. What I've noticed in going out at conferences is that there is a greater percentage of women, minorities, and veterans pursuing an equity strategy and a venture strategy. And so because of that, we recently announced a rule that was published last week in the Federal Register. I encourage all of you, happy to provide the link afterwards, which should make it easier for funds to raise capital from us to make early stage investments, which I think should help address the egregious deficiency and imbalance between diverse managers and the status quo. So those are some of the things that we're doing. And when I looked at the stats at SBIR and STTR, they've got 14% of the applicants are women and 14% of the grants are also women. Our stats are also significantly higher than the industry standard. So proud of that, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
And I certainly want to mention, for those who have gotten SBIR awards, there are some diversity supplements, depending on the agency that has provided the SBIR award to the company, where they're able to get some additional funding to bring on students to be able to assist if they've got an active, ongoing SBIR award. So do take a look at some of the SBIR diversity supplements that could be useful for companies.
I'll just add one other thing, is that as investors, I think we as LPs, a large LP, perhaps the largest LP in the lower middle market, I think it's our responsibility to require better reporting from fund managers and from portfolio companies. If you're not measuring it, you're not tracking it, then you're not going to prioritize it. And so we're increasingly asking funds to provide the metrics that they're using. And we've got a suggested set of metrics, happy to suggest those, or to share those with you after this panel. But what I'm seeing in DEI is akin to what I saw in impact in ESG investing in 2012 and 2013. Questions about definitions and what should we do. You don't necessarily have sophisticated enough track records that are sufficiently seasoned. I would just say, if you've seen the growth in ESG investing recently, I see a similar development happening in DEI. So I see a lot of encouraging trends. You're starting to see big funds do it, take a more concerted effort to improving diversity, having DEI policies, dedicated staff devoted to those things. We're actively looking at that, and I'd say the broader LP community has continued to is doing it, and I think they're taking a more active role in pushing those initiatives.
So I'm going to ask them one last question before we open it up for audience Q&A, and this is a question that I always ask. If you're ever on a panel that I moderate, know that I'm going to ask you this question. What books or podcasts have you been listening to that you would recommend?
I mean, I can go with an awesome one first.
Yeah.
So I just downloaded this app called Headway. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it basically takes all of the books that I was reading, and it's like Cliff Notes on steroids. It's written and nice chunks, so you're in the gym, you can read 2 books. So I highly recommend Headway. And then as far as podcasts are concerned, I listen to a lot of comedy podcasts, which I think is important to add some levity to your life. But really, that Headway app has been great because, we're all short on attention, I'm short on attention, but also time. But it's really an effective way to really get the most salient points out of, a lot of the books that you've read, and you just may not have the time.
Great. Linda?
I think I'm going to be pretty boring. I'm reading a book by a group of experts in the industry on counter-UAS operations and strategies. Fun, huh? And I just downloaded a book recommended to me. I'm really looking forward to reading it. It's called, I think it's An Unimportant Woman. And it's about a woman who ended up being a spy of World War II. She was a government employee, and somehow she lost her leg, and then she became a spy. And
Sounds interesting.
yeah, I can't wait.
Okay, Mike.
I'm usually not reading like science and tech policy books, but I actually am reading Chip Wars, which just came out in the last couple of weeks about how the semiconductor industry was built in the United States, very much about federally funded scientific research and the university system, spinning that out and creating Silicon Valley. So super cool. History. Also nice to talk about hardware again instead of Silicon Valley, like super software focused.
I don't feel so boring now.
But I just finished a fiction book called Trust, which was fascinating. It is the same story told from 4 different perspectives. And it is ultimately about who defines history, whose stories are told, whose stories are not told, and it's fascinating and just makes you pretty uncomfortable. I highly recommend Trust if you have some time to read fiction.
Great. And as a podcast, I would recommend How I Built This by Guy Raz if you want to get some insight into some of the popular businesses, everything from beauty companies to tech companies to food companies, and he goes back and he talks to the entrepreneurs about how they got to where they're at today. So now we'll open it up in case there's any questions from the audience. Yes?
I had one comment for Scott. Scott, you mentioned the unpaid internship where you had 16 people and 13 of them are women.
Brian, give her the mic.
Restarted my question. Thank you for the great panel, Judith, very well organized. A comment for Scott, and then I'm going to go back to Mike for the question. The unpaid internship, I find that many people who don't have the luxury of taking on an unpaid internship, that internship model is a little bit exclusive. So I'm thinking about ways that we can help as people who have funding source. You mentioned $37 billion that you've invested in. If you could think of ways to find money to pay the interns, so it would expand access to that type of internship for people who otherwise cannot afford. So it's something just to think about.
I completely agree, and unfortunately, $37 billion is allocated to funds investing in, but we charge fees for funds that apply, and I think that we could do a better job of allocating and providing some capital. I would say that we make the internship very flexible to work with their academic studies. So we're usually, these are undergrad and graduate students, and it's really flexible. It's very flat, and so we try to be as least demanding as possible. But I totally agree with you.
But this meant to be a comment, not a criticism.
It can be both, and that's not the first time I've heard it.
Pay those women.
So, Mike, you mentioned working with the faculty members and telling them about what the industry needs are, and I'm curious as to how the NJIT faculty feel or have responded positively or pushed back on that idea that you are trying to direct their research?
I've had really good luck, and I think it's because the willing come to me, right? I don't know, I can't give you a number, all right, of how many of our faculty want to work with industry. I do a lot of work, I'm an adjunct at Purdue, and however many thousands of faculty are at Purdue, like someone told me the number was 12, right? So certainly it's probably smaller here at NJIT. I think NJIT is very entrepreneurial. I work with the willing, and so they're always very receptive, and they recognize that they have a gap on their team, and they're seeking our help, and they put energy behind it. So I've had really good experiences. I think there's a self-selection process.
Can you talk about how you solicit interest? Do you tell them, here's what the industry needs and you have the expertise and go do this research, or we would like you to do research on that? Or is it something like, here is an opportunity that the industry has posted, we will help you apply to that funding?
Yeah, it's been pretty organic, and just our corporate relations person here at NJIT, Rick Rosenberg, when I first met him, he said the best way to do strategic partnerships at NJIT is just be a citizen of the university. So just be around, right? Which has been hard during COVID, obviously. But be a citizen of the university, understand what folks do, make those connections, and opportunities generally have presented themselves. And this infrastructure, it's really a handful of us, right? So I can only really work. We've talked about doing an internal roadshow, and we immediately were like, that's a bad idea, because I would immediately get overwhelmed being able to kind of do this work. I do look to other institutions, Rutgers in particular. I think what I do very much exists in Marika Dunn's group, in the kind of research development folks. There's a dedicated team to that. We don't have that number of folks, be able to dedicate time to that kind of stuff. So it's pretty organic, and I've been reluctant to make it super formal because I'm afraid to be overwhelmed by what the response would be.
Thank you. Linda, you're not.
I just have a comment. I'm Kimberly Foster. I'm the Dean of Science and Engineering at Tulane University. And I just wanted to comment on your question about paid internships. We've recently started, spurred on by my advisory board, we've just started a fund that pays for students so that they can take internships in startup companies that don't have the finances to pay them, or in other things like the internships you were saying. So I would encourage institutions. My board of advisors got around this and funded the endowment quick, considering how long it takes to establish, philanthropy. But I think this is something that's really important, and it's really important that people get paid for their time. And I think that if we can do more of that within our own institutions, maybe we can enable more people to do these things and help startup companies when they really don't have the funding. I love your comment also about the SBIR having supplements for students. I think that's another thing that it's easy to do. So taking advantage of it can also help people get paid for what they want and for what they can contribute, and it really helps diversity, equity, inclusion, because people cannot afford to do things for free, even if they want to, and when they're at that level of their careers. So thank you so much. A really interesting panel.
Thank you, Kimberly. I would also like to mention, in New Jersey, the New Jersey Department of Labor and Workforce Development has had programs in the past that allow companies to apply for funding along with a PhD graduate to pay that person's salary for a portion of time. And our office has had some conversations with the Department of Labor. They look like they're going to run another cycle of that program as well.
There's also a program that we're aware of, again, through NJIT, which is, I don't remember the exact name of it, it's a federal funding for interns. The federal government will pay 75% of the student's salary. The company pays 25%. So we're trying to participate in that. We've talked to a couple people. And I'll just add to the lady who spoke from Tulane. We have our marketing director in Baton Rouge, and we would be happy to work with you on hiring some interns.
Great. Well, I think we are right at lunch. And 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock, so we have a lunch break from 12 to 1. We also have some posters that you can take a look at. The posters will continue the networking. I think one of the things that we've really discussed a lot about today is increasing your social capital, so make connections. I know a couple people talked about getting outside the box. I think I read someplace another way to think about it is expand your comfort zone. Don't say I want to get outside of my comfort zone. Let's expand our comfort zone so we can be comfortable doing these things. So thank you and enjoy lunch and continue to network.
That's why you